The restaurant fell silent the moment Nathan pushed back his chair and folded the wedding contract in half. The disappointment in his eyes was so deep that even the waiter standing nearby looked away. Across the table, the woman he loved sat frozen, her hands trembling as her family watched with cold satisfaction. They believed they had won. They believed they had protected their daughter from a man they considered unworthy. What they didn't know was that the single father they had just humiliated owned the very company that had built their wealth. Think about that for a moment. If the person you loved was judged not by their heart but by their circumstances, would you fight for them or walk away? And if your family forced you to choose, what would you do? Nathan Brooks had spent most of his life fighting battles nobody ever saw. 5 years earlier, he had buried his wife after a sudden illness left him alone with a 3-year-old son named Ethan. The grief nearly destroyed him. While other men his age were building careers and traveling the world, Nathan was learning how to braid hair for school events, pack lunches before sunrise, and comfort a child who cried for his mother in the middle of the night. Money was never Nathan's problem. He had quietly inherited a controlling interest in Brooks Industrial Holdings, one of the largest manufacturing corporations in the Midwest, after his father's retirement. Yet he never spoke about it. He hated being valued for his wealth. Most employees barely knew who the owner was because Nathan preferred working behind the scenes rather than appearing in magazines or business events. 2 years after losing his wife, he met Sarah Collins. Sarah worked as a project manager for a subsidiary company owned by Brooks Industrial Holdings. She was intelligent, compassionate, and refreshingly genuine. Unlike many people Nathan had met, she treated Ethan like family from the very beginning. Slowly, the walls around Nathan's heart began to crack. Laughter returned to his home. Hope returned to his future. For the first time in years, Nathan believed happiness might still be possible. When he proposed, Sarah cried and said yes before he could even speaking. But not everyone celebrated. Sarah's parents, Richard and Margaret Collins, came from a wealthy social circle, obsessed with status. They viewed Nathan's life through a narrow lens. All they saw was a widower with a child. They assumed his modest lifestyle reflected financial limitations. Since Nathan never discussed his position in the company, they believed he was nothing more than an ordinary employee. At first, their criticism was subtle. Then it became relentless. They questioned his ability to provide stability. They whispered that Sarah deserved someone with fewer complications. They treated Ethan as an inconvenience rather than an innocent child. Every family dinner became another painful test. Nathan endured the insults because he loved Sarah. He hoped that, in time, they would see the man behind their assumptions. Instead, matters grew worse. A month before the wedding, Richard gathered several family members and launched a coordinated effort to stop the marriage. They threatened to cut Sarah out of family investments and inheritance plans. Relatives called her daily, warning that she was making the biggest mistake of her life. Sarah fought back at first. She defended Nathan tirelessly. But pressure has a way of exhausting even the strongest hearts. The night of the rehearsal dinner, the confrontation reached its breaking point. In a private room at an upscale restaurant, Sarah's family surrounded the couple with demands and ultimatums. They painted Nathan as a burden. They claimed Ethan would prevent Sarah from having the life she deserved. They spoke as if love could be measured on a financial spreadsheet. Nathan sat quietly through it all. Then Richard slid a document across the table. It was a cancellation agreement. If Nathan truly cared about Sarah, he should end the engagement and let her move on. The room waited for his response. Nathan looked at Sarah. Tears filled her eyes. The woman he loved wasn't agreeing with her family, but she was drowning beneath their pressure. In that moment, Nathan realized something heartbreaking. A marriage built on fear and coercion could never survive. With shaking hands, he signed the cancellation papers. The room relaxed with visible relief. Sarah broke down crying. Nathan stood, thanked everyone for their honesty, and walked away. No dramatic speech, no angry threats. Just a broken man carrying another shattered dream. 3 weeks later, Richard Collins arrived at corporate headquarters for an emergency executive meeting. His division had underperformed for months, and rumors suggested major restructuring was coming. The boardroom doors opened. Executives took their seats. Then Nathan entered. The color drained from Richard's face. Every executive in the room stood. Immediately, Nathan nodded politely before taking the chair at the head of the table. Silence filled the room. For the first time, Richard understood exactly who Nathan was. The man he had called unworthy. The man he had pressured into canceling a wedding. The man whose son he had treated as baggage. The owner of the entire corporation. Shock quickly turned into panic. Richard spent the meeting unable to focus. Yet Nathan never mentioned the wedding. Never referenced the humiliation. Never sought revenge. He conducted business professionally and fairly. That hurt Richard more than any punishment could have. Over the following months, guilt consumed him. He began seeing Ethan's smiling photograph on Nathan's desk during meetings. He watched employees speak about Nathan's generosity and integrity. He learned how Nathan had personally funded scholarships for workers' children and quietly supported struggling families. Everything Richard had assumed was wrong. One evening, he finally visited Nathan's office after hours. The apology that followed was difficult, emotional, and long overdue. For several minutes, Richard struggled to speak through tears. He admitted his arrogance. He admitted his prejudice. Most painfully, he admitted he had broken his daughter's heart. Nathan listened quietly. When Richard finished, there was nothing left to defend. Only regret remained. Months later, Richard convinced Margaret and the rest of the family to meet Nathan again. This time they came without pride, without judgment, without conditions. Sarah arrived expecting another confrontation. Instead, she found her parents apologizing through tears. Years of stubbornness collapsed in a single evening. For the first time, they truly saw the man they had rejected. A devoted father, a loyal partner, a good human being. Not long afterward, Nathan and Sarah began rebuilding what had been lost. Trust returned slowly. Love returned carefully. And one spring afternoon, beneath a small church covered in white flowers, they exchanged vows that should never have been delayed. When Ethan walked down the aisle carrying the rings, there wasn't a dry eye in the building. Richard sat in the front row crying harder than anyone. He understood something now that money and status had hidden from him for decades. Character cannot be measured by titles. Love cannot be measured by circumstances. And the greatest mistakes often begin with judging someone before truly knowing them. Years later, family photographs filled Nathan and Sarah's home. Ethan grew into a remarkable young man surrounded by people who finally valued him. The wounds of the past never completely disappeared, but they became reminders of how powerful humility, forgiveness, and second chances can be. Before we end, tell us in the comments, do you believe Sarah should have fought harder for Nathan, or do you think the pressure from her family would have broken almost anyone? As the sun set beyond their porch one quiet evening, Nathan watched his family laughing together and realized something extraordinary. The people who once tried to destroy his future had become part of the very future he cherished most. Sometimes the strongest victories aren't about proving others wrong. They're about keeping your heart kind long enough for others to discover how wrong they were. If this story touched your heart, please like, comment, share, and subscribe so more people can experience stories about forgiveness, hope, and the power of second chances.